the ramblings of a woman obsessed with restoring the balance. A bull's purpose. The high-pitched hum of heat buzzed around her like a war cry of frenzied flying insects. Raising her head to ease the tension mounting between her shoulders, the breeze was quick to cool the sheen of sweat at Melody's hairline. It was too late to consider a hat. The task had already begun. Gardening was meant to be light, welcome work, not this patch of dirt. The massive plot carved out of the backyard did not make the chore of weeding enjoyable in the slightest. It was labor, an overgrown jungle of hated perennials crowded out the desired ones. Melody's mother, Emma, had wanted a small corner of the acre yard reserved for some flowers, a splash of color to enjoy while at her kitchen sink gazing out the window or sipping coffee as she sat on their expensive deck. Hugh had a different view. The hunk of land Melody's father had dug out would have been massive for a public space. They should have known his go big or go home attitude would warrant a backhoe. In fact, her mother had mentioned a rock garden and envisioned stones no bigger than pumpkins jutting up between the peonies and the iris. Instead, Hugh arranged for a front-end loader to drop stones that any normal person would categorize as boulders to squat in the sprawl of upturned earth. Now, when Emma looked over her yard, she saw a neglected eyesore of weeds and overgrown plants choking out some sort of grotesque ruins. She hadn't asked for a hobby that would require multiple days to tend to. It was now a constant reminder of time she had reserved elsewhere, while the hours to work needed to maintain this wild foliage dogged her from the view from her kitchen window. Very rarely did Emma sit on the deck anymore, and when she did, she turned her back to her jungle garden. In an effort to help with this, Melody had set out to weed a section of garden, a mere portion that perhaps over a few days would make some sort of headway. There was no disillusions to this thankless effort that would hold very little impact. Nonetheless, she would try. At the very least, she hoped to inspire her mother to come out and garden by lightening this load somewhat. This, too, could backfire. In early summer, many of the flowers had yet to bloom. Weeding without a degree in horticulture was risky. Melody was prepared for her mother's misguided wrath. Unearthing the wrong plant could trigger Emma's rage. The rage meant for her husband, and frustration at her own neglect, could rear its ugly head and hiss and snarl at her daughter's good deed. You know, the kind that doesn't go unpunished. On this particular day, Melody stood and straightened her back and vowed once again to never own a garden this size. Cows had been grazing in the west field when she first knelt, trowel in hand. They were now migrating to the east. A slow trod down the hill was a muddy one. Their once creamy white coats were dappled with muck and manure as they slogged along. At the base of the gentle slope, water pooled and gathered in the wells of their hoof prints and pulled at their legs. The cows plodded on and glanced back every so often at their struggling calves, helpless. Mud sucked the tire length of their little limbs, every step a silent labor. Looking on, Melody spotted the smallest calf and worried for its safety, not knowing how to, but wanting very much to, intervene. But it endured. Measured and slow, the little cow, now dripped in mud, foraged and found a higher ground along the fence line. The effort to get there seemed greater than the straight line behind its mother, but Melody appreciated its will to find a better way. It was painstaking to watch as the small cow navigated through the thick inhospitable stalks of wild grass while the sodden earth clung to every step. The calf's unwavering effort was rewarded when it broke through to dry land. This was made obvious when it pranced and leapt towards its mother and the rest of its herd. Frolicking calves were always a gleeful sight. This little guy's struggle made for a rewarding happy dance, and a smile found its way to Melody's lips. Her gardening task seemed manageable after witnessing the inspirational feat of an unexpected muse. Then grunts of protest and annoying complaints interrupted this moment of purity as the only bull reached the marsh field. Always lagging behind and bringing up the rear, he ambled along. Seeking out the calf's path, the massive male sought higher ground to minimize his efforts. Leg muscles twitched as he easily pulled his mud-soaked ankles from the wet dirt. Detouring and avoiding the straight path left by the females, the bull balked and bitched the entire way, a noisy rant to the others making his inconvenience and rage known. As he passed Melody, his overprivileged, mud-smattered ball sack bobbled behind. "And that's why we eat the males!" she hollered at the disgruntled beast before returning to her work on her mother's garden.